As you may know, what I try to do is take a topic and then study it from the eyes of Brisk, and then go on to Breslov, which is Likutei Halachos, Rabbi Nassan of Breslov. So for the Brisk part of tonight's Shir, this should be part one of a series of 2 shiurim in preparation for Shavuos, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2 weeks from tonight is already Shavuos. Am I right about that? It's one of those 2-day holidays in Israel, Shavuos and then Shabbos, which I think we had last year as well. So that we have this Shir tonight, Thursday, and then next year, a week from tonight, on Shavuos. That's my global plan. Now, to start in Brisk, the interesting thing about Chag HaShavuos, and a lot of people are not necessarily aware of this, is that how many mitzvahs do we have on this day of Shavuos? Absolutely none. What do I mean none? In Sukkot, we have mitzvahs like Sukkah, we have Daled Minim, and we have Chibur Arava. There are a number of mitzvahs, and in Pesach, of course, we have Matzah, we have Maror, we have Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim. But when it comes to Shavuos, it's a holiday that's bereft from any particular mitzvah, other than a mitzvah that applies to any yontif. No,
not today.
Excellent. Okay, so Shalom took the next sentence out of my mouth. Where do we have a special mitzvah of Shavuos? We have it in the Beit HaMikdash. At the time that the Mikdash stood, there was a special mitzvah on Chag HaShavuos to bring shtei alechem, a carbon that's made up of 2 loaves of bread that are made out of wheat. Now, you may recall that there's a period of time that begins with the 16th of Nisan, 7 weeks before Shavuos, and that's called the carbon of the Omer. And the Omer was made of barley. So we have the barley carbon at the very beginning of the 7 weeks, and we have the wheat carbon, which is called the shtei alechem, at the end of the 7 weeks. And the Mishnah in Masechta Menachos tells us that these 2 carbonos work in tandem. What do I mean? They both have a power which is called a matir. What's a matir? Meaning there's some isur, and when you bring the carbon, it removes that isur. So let's go back to the Omer. The Omer on the 16th of Nisan is going to be matir a certain isur. What is the prohibition that the Omer is going to be matir? Chadash, exactly. All the new products of the 5 species of grains are prohibited from the new crop until after the Omer is brought. And in general, here in Israel, we don't really have to worry too much about that. Number one, because all of our produce that comes from Israel, by the time we get to Pesach time, it's all Yashan. Because here in Israel, there's only one planting season. But in Chutz La'aretz, and especially in America, you have a real problem of Chadash, because in America, there are 2 planting seasons. There's winter and there's spring. And a lot of the spring wheat, for example, but again, it applies to all 5 species of grains, wheat, rye, spelt, barley, and so forth, those will reach the market as early as January or February, way before Pesach. Pesach is in April or May, April, I should say, so that all that stuff that's hitting the market in America could be chadash. So that's a problem. How to solve that problem is a different issue, but not for us tonight. But when the carbon Omer was brought in the Beis HaMikdash, that would be matir the chadash, and that would convert all the chadash into yasha, which you're allowed to eat. However, even after the carbon Omer would transform chadash into yasha and be matir it, we still have an Isur Chadash. Where is that Isur Chadash? In the Beis HaMikdash. You can't bring any new carbon mincha from this year's crop until after, and again, now we have a parallel to the Omer, the Shtei Alechem on Chag HaShavuos. The Shtei Alechem is matir, the Chodesh in the Beis HaMikdash, for Karbanos on the Mizbeach, just like the Omer is matir Chodesh Ligvulin Lehedjot for our Achila outside the Mikdash. So if you follow the structure here, then you have a perfect mirror image, a parallel. You have a parallel between Omer being Matir Chodesh Bigvulin, Gvulin means outside the Mikdash, and you have the Shtei Alechem being Matir Chodesh in the Mikdash. So until the Shtei Alechem is brought on Shavuos, any carbon that's brought min mincha cannot be brought from this year's crop. It would have to be brought from last year's crop. And that changes with the Shtei Alechem on Chag HaShavuos. The Mishnah in Masechta Menachos, which again, if you might have gotten it just now in your phone, thanks to Shalom, says the following. What happens in an event that he brought a carbon min chodesh after the Omer, but before the Shtei Alechem? In that period of time, after the Omer, but before the Shtei Alechem, he accidentally, or hopefully not deliberately, he brought a carbon mincha min chodesh. You don't have the matir of Shtei Alechem because it's before Shavuos. But on the other hand, you did have a matir. Which matir did you have? The Omer. Again, the Omer is only matir outside of the Beis HaMikdash. And yet, paradoxically, the Mishnah in Masechta Menachos, on this page, it happens to be 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth source, says the following, Daf Samach Ches Amud Beis. If he brought a mincha before the Omer was brought, meaning before the 16th of Nisan, then he has to replace that mincha. It's absolutely disqualified. But if he brought the mincha min hachodesh after the Omer was brought, before the Shtei Alechem, then b'di'eved, post facto, it's kosher. And the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Tarfon, the great Tana of that time, was looking at this Mishnah and he didn't understand. Ma ben kodem li Omer, li kodem Shtei Alechem. If you brought that mincha min hachodesh before the Omer was brought, then it's possible, and it has to be replaced. The same halacha should apply even after the Omer is brought. Why? Because the Omer is only matir outside the Beis HaMikdash, but not inside the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara goes on to tell us a story that there was a certain student of Rabbi Tarfon. I don't want to call him a smart aleck, but his name was Yehuda bar Nechemia. And he came along and he said the following. Again, I'm going to read the language of Rabbi Yehuda. He says, Lo im amarta kodem li omer shekein lo hutar michlolo eitzel hedjot. Tomar kodem l'shtei alechem shehutar michlolo eitzel hedjot. So before we understand the logic of Rabbi Yehuda, I just want to tell you the story. We all like to hear a story, but this story is kind of sad. Because what happened was, when the Talmud said this to the Rebbe's face turned yellow. In other words, he was very embarrassed about it. And this Yehuda, this student who came forward with the argument, he starts dancing in the streets. Savu Pana. He was very happy. Why? Because he stumped the Rebbe. Amalo Rabbi Akiva Yehuda, Savu Panecha Sheishavtes HaZoken. You're so happy because you defeated the Zoken meaning Rabbi Tarfon. To me, I'd be very surprised in Tarich Yomim if you live a long life. The Gemara goes on to tell us that this story took place sometime between Pesach and Shavuos. And another Amoris says that he came on Aliyah for Shavuos and he asked, where is Yehuda bar Nechemia? The Amrulo Niftar v'holachlo. He had already died. And this may be an example of what the Gemara says about why the Talmidim died. How many Talmidim died during the Omer period? Would you know? 24,000. And the Gemara says in Yevamos Shelo Kibdu Zeba Zed, there was no covered one to the other. Maybe this story, I'm just thinking out of the box here, belongs to that Gemara. And this Yehuda bar Eloi, Yehuda bar Nehemiah, who thought he was such a smart aleck, I defeated the Zaken.
What did he say to the telephone?
But that we didn't get to yet. Okay. So what was the logic of Yehuda bar Nehemiah that in a sense stumped Rabbi Tarfon? He said the following. There's a concept called, and I wish I had a whiteboard here, Hutar Michlolo. Somebody wants to write that down. Hutar Michlolo. What does that mean? That if you have a prohibition and you need two different actions to remove that prohibition, then when the first action is registered, you already diminish and lower the chumras ha'isur, meaning the severity of the isur is already diminished by the first action. You need the second matir. But once you have the first matir, it's not the same tokef ha'isur. It doesn't have the same power to it. So therefore, the logic of Yehuda bar Nehemiah is as follows. You need two things to happen before you can bring a mincha from the new crop. Number one, you need to bring the omer. And number two, you need to bring the shtei alechem. But there's a basic difference. Because before you brought the omer, there's no huta mechlolo. It's a full-fledged isur. But after you brought the omer already, then huta mechlolo. It's kind of like, if I can give this as a simile, you have a balloon. As soon as you take a pin and you puncture the balloon, what starts happening? The air starts coming out. So it may take a while, especially if it's a big balloon and a small pin, but what you're going to see in front of your eyes is that slowly but surely that ball, that balloon is diminishing, it's shriveling up. So here too, Hutar Mechlolo means that you had a big isur called Chadash L'Mizbeach, and now you brought the Omer. Once you brought the Omer, you've already begun a process of puncturing the balloon. It's Hutar Mechlolo. To weaken it. And once you weaken it, then b'di'evet, if you brought the korban min mincha chadasha, the mincha is ksheira, because you've already weakened the isur by bringing the Omer. But we see clearly that the Omer and the shtei alechem are working in tandem. Do you follow? They are both coming to achieve the same goal and to be matir chadash. Just that we need both the Omer on the 16th of Nisan, as well as the shtei alechem on Chag HaShavuos 49 days later. But the process has already begun of being matir once you pass the Omer. And that's called Huta Mechlol.
When you bring the Omer, so it's matir the new wheat. That's the wheat that's already been harvested. We can't eat it, right?
Well, I don't know if it has to be harvested. It has to be after Hashrosh, which means 3 days after you planted it. But go on. That's not relevant to your question. But
so let's say after you bought the Omer, you planted wheat,
right,
and you were able to harvest it before Shavuos.
Right.
So then it didn't have the matter of the Omer, but it had the shtei alechem.
Right.
So that be.
So then it would seem. Well, again, that's a little complicated because it depends how you learn the matter. Is the matter the bringing of the Omer or the fact that the Omer was already brought? But if it's the bringing of the Omer as a chalos maisa matir, then you're right. In such a case, the mincha would be possible even b'di'evet because it didn't have the matir of the Omer. Mm-hmm. But honestly, Shalom, I thought you could ask me another question. Why would the Omer have any impact on a mincha, a korban mincha, as far as the Yisur Chodesh L'Mizbeach? Omer is a matir only bigvulin.
Maybe it's also
So that's what I have for you on these pages. Again, it's in the phone, I guess. in the name of the Rashba. The Rashba says, Yesh l'tmoah. I don't understand. Rabbi Tarfon couldn't figure this out on his own? But furthermore, I don't even understand what the argument against Rabbi Tarfon was. What's going on over here? He says the Omer is only relevant outside of the Mikdash. Says the Rashba, Hayadas Rabbi Tarfon, she'isur chadash lemizbeach, that's a separate isur, and it doesn't have anything to do with the isur leheja. We call it by the same name. It's called chadash, but that's outside the mizbeach, and then it's chadash lemizbeach. Okay, fine. You share the same term, but they're two separate isurim, and the isur chadash legavoa is chal until you bring the shtei alechem. And therefore, Rabbi Tarfon did not understand how you could apply the principle of hutar mechlolo after the Omer before the shtei alechem. The Omer has no power and no impact on the Isur for Mizbeach, because the only matir for the Isur Mizbeach could be what? The shtei alechem. V'lachein, hoyer Rabbi Tarfon Omer, hoil v'Isur legavah v'Isur b'fnei atzmo. Each one, whether it's the Omer as far as Gvulin or the Shtei Alechem as far as the Mizbeach, those are two separate independent Isurim. For Rabbi Yehuda ben Nechemya, his Shiva, what was his response? The Ein Das HaKosuv, you misunderstood the Torah. She'ei Chodesh legavoa Isur b'fnei atzmo. And the Isur lehejot Isur b'fnei atzmo, meaning before the Omer. But he says, Gamli Achra Omer, he said, I'm sorry, Kodem Omer, Nesar lehejot ulgavoa be'isur echad. This is what I heard from Rav Soloveitchik. This is real Brisk Torah in interpreting the Rashba, that the Oser of Chadash is common to both Hejot, meaning outside the Mizbeach, and to Mizbeach. It's Mikoch Isur echad. In other words, because it was Nesar lehejod, it was Nesar also legavoa. Just as the Torah said that in order to remove the Isur to hejod, all you need is the Omer. But if you want to remove the Isur legavoa, you need two matirim. You need number one, the matir of Omer, and number two, you need the matir of the Shtei Alechem. So let's just try to summarize what we said. There's a concept called hutar mechlolo, and that means that when there's a process to remove an isur and you need two stages in the process, then after the first stage has already been implemented.
Is there a classic example of that?
But that I need. Is there an encyclopedia Talmudid here?
No,
Because I don't remember. I had it before. Hutar mechlolo. So do me a favor if you can, David, because my library is very limited. I sent 31 boxes of Sfarim to Har Choma as a gift. Did I ever tell you that somebody called me up and he wanted to be Meshav Avedi? He says, it says your name in it. I said, no, I gave it as a donation. Anyway, so write me a one-line email, because I'm going to forget, called Hutar Mechlolo. Just give me those two words.
Okay.
And I have Bar Ilan on my library, so on my computer, so I'll be able to look up Hutar Mechlolo. So I'll give you, B'li at least one, maybe even two examples of Hutar Mechlolo.
Sorry.
So again, just to summarize, Rabbi Yehuda bar Nechemia applies this mechanism of Hutar Mechlolo to explain the Mishnah in a case where he brought a mincha min HaChodesh after the Omer, but before the Shtei Alechem. Why? Because the Omer and the Isur Chodesh lehejot is the power and the agent that generates the Isur L'Mizbeach. It's just that L'Mizbeach we need two matirim, and for Hejot we only need one matir. So after the Omer is brought, we can eat min HaChodesh from all the new tefua. Everything is yasha. But we cannot bring min HaChodesh to the Mizbeach. But if we do so, we already have at least one half of the matir and therefore the Isur is diminished, and the Eved, the carbon is kosher. So that's the part of Brisk.
As an example.
What do you have?
This
This is the encyclopedia?
Google.
Okay. Isur l'nazir. Let's see what he says. That's difficult. Mace mitzvah. 1 second. Nazir mahal pederech. Poga b'mace mitzvah. Mitami lo. V'chein isur nazir l'galech esara hutum chulom. L'galam v'tiglachas mitzvah shenazir nitztar. No, this
Would
is
maybe like a Tvul Yom?
yeah. This is not. Oh, Tvul Yom, maybe Herav Shemesh and then Tvila. Well, the other way around, I should say.
The next day, if it was
Right. So it would be
Kadosh.
Tvila, which is during the day, and then Herav Shemesh, and then the carbon the next morning. Well, that depends on Mechusar Kapar, but that's an excellent example. These examples, I'm not sure who wrote this, but if you can get the Encyclopedia Talmudit, that's a lot more reliable. Okay, we ready for a little Breslov?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Can you just repeat, what did Rabbi clarify? He didn't understand this?
No, he
What is
understood very well that the Isur LeHejod and the Isur LeGavah are two independent Isurim. They share the same terminology called Chadash, but they're two different Isurim. One Oser is the fact that you haven't brought the Omer, and that's LeHejod. And there's another Oser that generates the Isur Mizbeach, and that's based on the fact you didn't bring the Shtei Alechem. The fact that you brought the Omer has no impact whatsoever on the Isur Chadash LeGavah. And it was Rabbi Yehuda bar Nechemi who said that the only way we can understand the Mishnah is if we assume that the Isur LeGavah includes also the Isur Mizbeach. In other words, the Isur Mizbeach LeGavah is a result of the Isur LeHejod. The Isur LeHejod generates an Isur not only LeHejod, but it's called Chadash, which is also LeMizbeach. And therefore, I need a two-stage process of Mati. I need the Mati of the Omer, and finally the clinch will be the Mati of the Shtei.
I'm pretty sure the Rambam has a separate losat say for bringing Chadash to the Mizbeach without the Shtei Alechem.
Right. Well,
What's
yeah.
the-
Even no, I don't know. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda bar Nechemi, I think it would be counted as two separate isurim. But what he's saying is that although the two separate isurim, right, when you count lavim, you count by the ma'isa aver. The two separate averis here. One is achila, and the other is what we call achilas mizbeach, when you bring something on the mizbeach. So it would definitely be counted as two lavim. The only thing is that Yehuda bar Nechemi was mechadesh, but it cost him his life. Right? He was mechadesh that as a result of the Isur LeHejod, you also have an Isur LeMizbeach. If you get a chance, you'll take a look at this Rashba. I was so impressed with the Rashba. I thought it was Reb Chaim Brisker. You know, the Rashba lived about 750 years before Reb Chaim Brisker. Okay. I need to get myself, which I should have done before the shear, a little bit of hot water. David, you don't mind? Okay.
Just hot water?
Yeah, hot water, but not boiling hot, but hot. You know, if it's boiling hot, I won't be able to drink it. Okay. So as we said at the outset, what separates Shavuos with its own unique mitzvah? That's only in the Beis Hamikdash where they have the mitzvah of Shtei Alechem. Okay. However, in Breslov, although there's no separate mitzvah outside the Mikdash on Chag HaShavuos, there are a lot of minhagim, by the way. I hope you like cheese balances, right? And there's Akdamus, and there's standing for the Kriya of the Aseres Dibros, and there's a Tikkun Leil Shavuos, and there's staying up at night. I mean, a lot of different minhagim. But as far as the Bible is concerned, as far as the Torah, there are no mitzvahs outside of the Mikdash on Chag HaShavuos. But yet, in Chasidus, there's a, thank you so much, David, Tizkel mitzvahs.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So there are two ways of asking the question about what's unique about Shavuos. One is what I call the Brisker way of asking. What is the separate mitzvah that's generated by the Kedushas Hayom that's unique to Shavuos? And that's in Mikdash, the Shtei Alechem. But there's another question you could ask. What's my avoda to serve Hashem on Shavuos? That's more of a Hasidic approach. When we talk about avoda, we're not talking about the Taryag mitzvahs. We're not talking about the Kedushas Hayom as a halachic entity, but as a personal way of experiencing Chag HaShavuos. And of course, it goes without saying that the preparation for Chag HaShavuos begins with what? With the Omer. In that sense, there's an overlap between Brisk and Breslov, because just like in Brisk, it's the Omer that leads up to the Shtel Lechem, so too from a Hasidic perspective of Avoda, the Avoda begins during the Omer period and reaches its climax on Chag HaShavuos. Now, in order to understand what that avoda is during Sfiras HaOmer and culminating on Chag HaShavuos, we look at Hilchas Sfiras HaOmer in Likutei Halachos, and I'm hoping that you'll find a page that says Kuf Samach Tes. Is there such a page?
Yeah.
Halacha Beis, Inyan Sfiras HaOmer v'Chag HaShavuos. Yeah? Okay. Now he tells you, as he always does, Rabbi Nassan, that he's going to base his discourse on a lesson from Rabbi Nachman. And he always identifies the lesson, and he gives you a sort of a summary of an overview of that lesson. So what I'd like to do, I have a copy of the Likutei Maran in front of me, and it's Simon Hay. It's famous because it's called B'chatzotzus, called Shofar Riu Lifnei Hashem. And the word Hariu, which means to sound the shofar, has another meaning to it. Hariu could, if you go to the shorish of the word in Hebrew, it's Ra'em or Ra'am. Ra'am is thunder. You may know that if you hear thunder, you make a bracha. So a lot of people know this Torah because of the concept of thunder. What does Rabbi Nachman teach us in this very complexly woven lesson called Siman Hay? Okay, so he starts by telling us that, trying to figure out how to start this. There's something called a Gzar Din. What does that mean? That in the heavenly courts, a decision was made and a ruling was handed down that we are guilty. Who's we? It's not clear. You know, it could be Klal Yisrael as a whole are guilty, or maybe an individual. Anyway, there's been what we would call a verdict of condemnation. And the only power that we have, once that verdict has been signed and sealed, so to speak, I'm just using that phrase metaphorically, is tefillah. Prayer is the only counter force or agent that could undermine an already complete gzar din. Am I making sense so far? Yeah. Okay. However, we have to understand that there are two categories of tefillah. One category is, let's say, low ebb. It's not so powerful. It could only be successful before the Gemar did, before the decree was decided upon up in the heavenly courts. So Beis Din up in the heavenly courts, the courts are going through deliberations, and the kategar, that's the prosecutor, gets up in front of the court and he says, let's say so-and-so is guilty of this crime, and there's a whole process of investigation, and that will lead up to a verdict. So at that point, tefillah is definitely effective. But once the Gzar Din has been issued, then the tefillah has to be so much more powerful to undermine, to cancel and nullify a Gzar Din that's already been accepted up in the courts. What are these two levels of tefillah? Says Rabbi Nachman that these two levels of tefillah parallel two levels of prophecy. To use the terminology of the Kabbalah, there's something called aspaklaria me'ira, and there's something called aspaklaria she'ena me'ira. In other words, you can have a prophet who prophesizes in absolute clarity, but normally, in 99 out of 100 cases, the prophet doesn't see absolutely clear. He's got to sort of interpret the prophecy. Does anybody know, by chance, which prophet saw his vision, his prophecy, experienced his prophecy as an aspaklaria hame'ira?
Moshe.
Excellent, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu saw the aspaklaria me'ira. He writes, "V'zeu achiluk bein nevuas Moshe Rabbeinu levein nevuas shara neviim." Kipirish Rashi, as Rashi tells us, this is Rashi in Avos. Vaydaber Moshe es Roshei Amatos zeh hadover shatziva Hashem. Pirish Rashi kol hanevim nisnabdu on one level, and Moshe Rabbeinu on a higher level, which is called zeh hadover bechinas aspaklaria hame'ira. It's like a clear looking glass. It's like a glass that's absolutely transparent. Says the Rebbe, Elu shtei bechinos nevuos, these two categories of nevuah, yesh ba'avodas habore, they parallel two levels of service of Hashem. What are these two levels, the lower and the higher level? Yesh adam sha'osa mitzvah, he wants to be paid off. What does that mean? He's waiting for Olam Haba, and in the next world, he's going to benefit from the mitzvah. So he's motivated by what? The reward that's coming. So does he love the mitzvah per se? Well, yes and no, but he doesn't really have a full love of the mitzvah. He's doing it because what? He needs the reward. If they would give him Olam Haba without having to do the mitzvah, oh yeah, he would be very happy. And that's a spaklaria she'ena me'ira. He sees something from a distance. He can't see it clearly. So his relationship to a mitzvah is like a long distance relationship. But then he says, there's another level of avodas Hashem. And that parallels the Navi of Moshe Rabbeinu, who sees Bezeh Davar B'Aspaklaria Me'ira. Eina Rotze B'Schar Mitzvahs. He's not motivated by the reward for the mitzvah. Ela Rotze, what motivates him? A mitzvah atzma. Just the mitzvah himself. Nothing extraneous to the mitzvah. He loves the mitzvah. And he's absolutely full of joy by doing the mitzvah. And he doesn't want any schar. Leave me alone. Don't give me reward. I get the reward because I love the mitzvah. So what's his olam haba? From his perspective, it's not the reward in the world to come, but the mitzvah itself is his olam haba. And that's parallel to aspaklaria me'ira v'zeh umishu b'madrega zos osa mitzvah b'simcha gedola kol kach. He's so enamored, enjoying the mitzvah. He loves the mitzvah. She'eino rotze b'shum schar. Afilu b'olam haba, he doesn't want schar. I mean, that's not what motivates him. And here the Rebbe comes up with a metaphysical idea that when a person prays, how do they know whether they're praying before the Gemar Din was issued? Right, we know what a Gemar Din is, a final decision, or it's already afterwards. How do you know? How could you link up with the heavenly court? Pick up a phone or a WhatsApp call. It's probably an expensive call if you don't use WhatsApp. And you say, "Oh, well, tell me, did you issue the Gemar Din or not?" How would you know such a thing? And in effect, the question is, what kind of tefillah would be effective? Because the lower grade of tefillah can only be effective before the Gemar Din. Who is capable of a tefillah that can undermine and vitiate a Gemar Din? Only someone who reaches the highest level of avoda, in which what motivates him is just the mitzvah itself and his great simcha for that mitzvah. No reward is necessary. Only that person, says Rabbi Nachman, the person who reaches the level of Zeh Dover, of the Nevuah Aspaklaria Debeira, he reaches the level of Madrega Shu Nena Mea Mitzvah Atzma, and he's not interested in the schar. Such a person will be able to know, again, this is metaphysics, he'll be able to know whether it's Liachar Gemar Din or not. And even if it's Liachar Gemar Din, his prayer could be effective to undermine the Gemar Din. Okay, now there is what?
The mitzvah in the best possible way. So what? Even if the Zardin wasn't given, you would probably get the best of Zardin also.
Correct. I'm not saying that he is a Kal V'chomer here. If he can have an effective tefillah to change the Gemar Din, then for sure his tefillah would be effective before the Gemar Din. But I guess again we'd have to see more of Likutei Maran here because we only touched the surface here. But the energy force and the power that the tefillah has to have, is a very different thing. It takes a lot more, energy and a lot more fuel to generate that higher level of tefillah. So he's going to be able to figure out what's going on in the heavenly courts.
We know we have certain times. We know, like there's Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, there's Hoshana Rabbah. I think Kabbalah also goes up to Hanukkah. It's like we know that there is certain points that I don't know. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the individual. We don't know, right?
He doesn't know.
Chazal tell us that every day a person is judged, so we don't know exactly. So Chas v'Shalom, you see a person who's very ill, and you want to know, is this after the Gemar Din? Like my mother-in-law passed away just 3 months ago from blood cancer, and we were hoping that we could change the Gzar Din. But that takes a very powerful kind of tefillah. Okay, let's see how many times, and just joking with you, how many times does Rabbi Nachman in his lesson, number 5, mention Chag HaShavuos? Zippo. Do you follow? Here's where we have Rabbi Nosson. Because Rabbi Nachman, the history is he commissioned his great Talmud, his disciple Rabbi Nosson, to build an entire complex around the Shulchan Aruch based on the lessons and the teachings of Rabbi Nachman. So let's see what he has here. Okay, so now we're up to the second paragraph. Vilavo l'simcha. Okay, remember I told you that the name of this lesson number 5 of the Rebbe Rabbi Nachman is Re'amim. Re'amim means thunder. And that comes up later on. Let's see if I know I found it before. Let's see. Just give me a second here, if I can find it. You found it?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. The first word I didn't hear you. Vilavo. Okay, let me see. You know, I'm looking. I wanted to go back to Likutei Moharan. That's just my own challenge, so to speak. Okay, so we'll leave it for now, although I saw it earlier. Oh, is this it? Ah. He says the following. There's a certain level that a person could reach, could attain, and he calls it kolo, his voice, meaning his prayer, naser ra'amin. It becomes thunder. His voice is converted into thunder. Now, what is Ram? Ram, again, is thunder, and we could study the science of it. But on a conceptual level, Ram is called Sitra de Yitzchak. What does that mean? We know there are three Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and each one is a paradigm of one of three midos. Avram is the paradigm of what? Chesed, and Yitzchak is the paradigm of Gvura. So the Ram is Misitra de Yitzchak, and that means Gvura. And the Rebbe quotes a pasuk, trying to figure out where this pasuk is, 59. Okay. The Ra'am Gvurosov. So the Torah clearly connects Ra'am with Gvura. And Gvura is might or power. And that's the thunder. The thunder has a tremendous power. Val Yidei Zeh, and when the kol, the voice of tefillah, becomes Ra'am, then Dvarav Nishmayim, then it has a tremendous impact up above, even after what? The Gzar Din. V'lavo l'simcha al yidei ra'amin. We spoke about the fact that when you do a mitzvah and nothing motivates you other than the joy of the mitzvah itself, then you can achieve ra'amin, which is the kol sh'adam motzi b'koach gadol b'tfilasa. And he says, the ikar hara'amim heim migvuros. The thunder emanates from the midah of gvura. And what happens? Heim pogim b'moach. Somehow this kol goes all the way up and it hits the clouds. And when that happens, you create thunder. And not only that, the Geshem, the rains, begin to come down. So let's say, for example, there was a Gzar Din up in heaven that there won't be any rains, Chas v'Sholem. So the Ram of the Kol Tefillah, when it becomes Ram through that Simcha, because he loves the mitzvah, then it's able to hit the clouds. And as a result of hitting against the clouds, the rains will fall. There's a lot of metaphysics here. He says the following. When a person goes through the Omer period and he reaches the level of Chag HaShavuos, which is called Kabbalas HaTorah, what is the perfect ideal culmination of this period? He says, Ikar Kabbalas HaTorah, to achieve Kabbalas HaTorah and Shavuos, you need that perfection. And what is that perfection? Lasos ha-mitzvos b'simcha gedola. To fulfill the mitzvos with such a great joy. He doesn't need the payoff of the reward of the world to come. The best reward that you can give him for doing a mitzvah is give you another mitzvah. He wants another opportunity and another opportunity. And his olam haba is the mitzvah itself. That is the clear looking glass, that level of nevuah, which is what? The level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Says Rabbi Nassan, the Yisrael b'mamad Har Sinai, every Jew at Har Sinai, zachu lekabel Torah al yidei Moshe, through Moshe Rabbeinu they achieved Kabbalas HaTorah, zachu lezeh shleimus bechinas haspaklaria meira. Every Jew reached that level of haspaklaria meira of Moshe Rabbeinu. K'moshe Kasuv, as the pasuk says at the beginning of Dvarim, panim b'panim dibra Hashem imachem. Face to face, God spoke to you. When you're looking through a window or a glass, how could it be called panim el panim? The glass is full of clouds or mist or fog. You won't see clearly. That's not called panim el panim. But the answer is that you have an aspaklaria meira, which means that the glass is perfectly transparent. The kiblu atorah yidei Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to be the one to give us the Torah? Because he reached the level of aspaklaria meira, and therefore through Moshe Rabbeinu, Klal Yisrael were able at the time of Kabbalas HaTorah to achieve that level of aspaklaria meira. Shehi bechinas, which is the aspect of simcha shel mitzvah biatzma, where I love and I enjoy the mitzvah itself. V'zeu bechinas hasimcha shel Shavuos. What's so great and special about the simcha of Chag HaShavuos? What makes the simcha of Chag HaShavuos unique? It's the simcha of Kabbalas HaTorah, which is the simcha of loving the mitzvahs, which is the level of aspaklaria meira. You know, when I was a child, I don't know if you had the same experience, I was taught up to believe that on midnight of Shavuos, the sky opens and you could ask for anything. Did you have that?
It doesn't.
I don't know, I never found the source for it. It's probably in the Kabbalah somewhere. But we used to read, our parents read us a book, a series called K'tantan, right? And I still remember, you know, some of the stories from K'tantan. I don't know if they're still on the market. You could still get it. If not, you know, it's like old comic books, or you could sell it on eBay. I remember the K'tantan story for Chag HaShavuos. You know, he waits up till midnight, you know, wait to see the sky open up to make that prayer. But in truth, if on the night of Shavuos through Kabbalas HaTorah we reach the level aspaklaria meira, then our koach tefillah at that moment in time is the highest level of tefillah of Ram, of the bechina of Yitzchak, of Gvuros, that creates such a thunder that it could even change an already signed and sealed decision on high. I don't know if that's to be at midnight. I don't know. Right.
But also all of Am Yisrael.
At that moment.
Where does it say that we're going to see it again? That will.
It could be that the level of aspaklaria meira parallels Adam v'Chava before the Chet. And that's called the Or HaGanus, the hidden light, because Chazal say they were able to see Misofa Olam v'Ad Sofa. And it seems from Chazal that at Har Sinai, we reached that level of Adam HaRishon Kodem L'Chet. And there are other statements of Chazal that when Mashiach will come, will also reach that level of Adam Rishon Kodav Lachet. So that would be Aspaklaria Me'ira. And now Rabbi Nosson wants to connect this with Nasev and Ishma. How so? He asks the obvious question: what does it mean, Nasev and Ishma? Right? We'll do, and then we'll hear. How can you do anything until you hear what you have to do? It's a paradox. And furthermore, Rabbi Nachman teaches in a different lesson, that's number 22, that the pasuk in Yeshaya, V'simchas olam al rosham, which means the ultimate, infinite, endless simcha, is the simcha that we reached when we declared Nasev and Ishma. So Nasev and Ishma is called Simchas Olam. Ulechara Tamua. I don't understand. How can you first have Asiyah and then Shmiyah? And not only that, the pasuk says at the end of Parashas Mishpatim, Kol Asher Diber Hashem Nasev and Ishma. So again, what's Kol Asher Diber Hashem? Well, how do you translate those words?
I think Hashem says.
What? No, I'm going to ask you again, David, because there's a grammatical, in terms of the tense. Say it again. Kol Asher Diber Hashem. What's Diber Hashem? Diber is in the past tense. Whatever God said, Nasev and Ishma. What do you mean Nasev and Ishma? You've already heard what Hashem says. So why are you saying Nishma? Which again would solve that paradox, how you could have Nasev before Nishma. But the answer is Kol Asher Diber Hashem. Whatever we heard from Hashem. Nimtza. Shemavor ba'posik shasiyahu liachar sheyidaber Hashem. It was after Hashem spoke, then they committed themselves to implement the will of God. Im kein echis hikdimu asiyah l'shmiyah. What does it mean that the asiyah came before the shmiyah? Ach efshal lefarish al piyah nal shezachu oz l'simcha. At that moment of Kabbalas HaTorah, they reached that high level of simcha in which they loved the mitzvahs without the schar of Olam Haba. And all they would want out of the mitzvah was what? What would you hope for? Another mitzvah. Zeu Nasev and Ishma. Now we understand Nasev and Ishma. Why? First, Yasu Kol Asher Yidaber Hashem. And now, what's V'nishma? V'nishma means let's get another mitzvah. So the first mitzvah they did was because they heard the word of God. And they implemented with such love and such simcha, they didn't care for any olam haba, any schar. And now they said, V'nishma, can we hear another mitzvah? All new pshat Nasev V'nishma. I thought I knew all the pshat of Nasev V'nishma, but this one is brand new to me. And therefore, Nasev V'nishma is called in the pasuk in Yeshaya, Simchas Olam. What does that mean, Simchas Olam? What is a simcha that's eternal? A simcha that's eternal is a simcha of the mitzvah atzma. Why is it eternal? Because it's not contingent on anything else. There are no motivations outside extraneous to the mitzvah. So it's purely the mitzvah itself. And the mitzvah itself is eternal, and therefore the simcha of that mitzvah is eternal. And the only thing that you could want after that great simcha is to have more simcha, meaning have another opportunity for another mitzvah. Ki Hashem yisbarach chayv la'ad v'kaim la'ad. Simchas olam means like the Ribono Shel Olam who is infinite. Al kein ha-simcha me'ha-mitzvah ba'atzma hu simchas Hashem yisbarach. Why is it called the simcha of God? Because it is the eternal simcha of Simchas Olam. The lavo l'simcha zu al yidei ra'amim. And now he connects the part of the Rebbe's lesson about the tefillah of ra'amim, right? That powerful thunder, that coal that goes all the way up to the clouds and brings down the rains. And hey bechinas kol shofar. What happened during Matan Torah? Do you see where Reb Nosson is completing what he got from his Rebbe? as we say in Tfilas Musaf on Rosh Hashanah, Bekolos Ubarakim Alem Niglesa. You revealed yourself through thunder. And Bekol Shofar Alem Ovata. So there was a shofar at Matan Torah. What was that shofar? Chazal tell us that the shofar was taken from the Isle of Yitzchak. Why Yitzchak? Because this is the powerful thunder. This is the shofar of Ra'amim, of Gvura. And Ki al Yidei Ra'amim v'kol shofar shel Matan Torah. What is that power? And again, this is a part of the lesson of Rabbi Nachman that we didn't get a chance to learn, that the Ra'amim, that thunder, has a powerful impact on the lave of a person, because what prevents a person from having true, genuine, complete simcha? It's something called the akmumius shebalev, the diversions, what's the word? What? The crooked part. Yeah, there's a fancy word for it in English. Yeah, of the lave. In other words, we begin to get fearful, and we're afraid of this, and we're afraid of that, and the rockets are coming down, and we think everything is coming through our natural existence, and then there's other types of akmumi yeshuvalev. In a word, it's those problems in the heart that prevent a person from achieving pure simcha. Aval, if on the other hand, he can achieve lefanos es hamoch, if he could clean out his brain, do what do we call it, a brainwashing. Is there such a phrase in English? A brainwashing. He needs to do a brainwashing. And what does he have to wash out of his brain? Machshavos chitzonios, all sorts of extraneous things like, this happened because of that, and this happened because of that, and whatever. I don't want to get too personal here. All right. Anyway, and Hirhurim, all sorts of terrible thoughts that come to his mind, and he doubts, and he thinks about this and things like that. Bechinas chametz, and that is akmumi shebalev. If he can get rid of all those from his heart, then he could achieve the level of gvuros, of ra'amim, of kol shofar. And which shofar? He's going to hear the shofar of Matan Torah.
The dialogue with Moshe and Hashem.
What do you mean? Could be. That's a good idea. He's saying that the pasuk says that Moshe Yadaber Vashim Sham Yanenu Elokim Yanenu Bekol. Maybe that's the same kol here that we're talking about here. And I'll just complete it with this little paragraph. He says, Zebechinas Memtes Yemei Sfira. What is the purpose of the 49 days of Sfira? Yotzim mitumah l'tara. We're trying to clean our brains, get rid of all that contamination in the brain. The machshavos zaros and the chitzonios and the chametz and the fears and so forth and so on. Kidei lios re'uyim l'kabalas haTorah. Because now we can say Nasa v'nishma, we cleaned up the filth and the contamination from our brain. And now we're ready to create a kol, which will be an eternal kol. That will be a kol of ra'amim, of thunder, that could pierce through the heavens, because we achieve the ultimate level of simcha. What's the ultimate level of simcha? Where I want to do the mitzvah. Why? Because I love the mitzvah. For no other reason. So these 49 days are days of cleaning up our acts, cleaning up our brain. It's a tahara, a purification process. We came out of Mitzrayim. We were low down and contaminated by Tumas Mitzrayim, and that's chametz. Now we have the Yemei Sfira, in which we purify ourselves and cleanse ourselves of what? Of all those terrible Tumas Mitzrayim and the chametz of Mitzrayim, which is pogem in the das, right? We have a concept called das of kedusha, the sanctified understanding in which we understand that everything comes from Hashem. Azai nishmoim kol hara'amim shel kabbalas haTorah. When we achieve, as a result of the Yemei Sfira, the ultimate Tara, that now we can be makabel the Torah without all these contaminations in our brain, and then we could hear the call of the shofar, which is the Ayel Shel Yitzchak, the Gvura, that could create ra'amim. And all this is because we've achieved the level of kol ra'amim shekabal Torah v'zochin l'simcha, and we could merit that ultimate simcha that's infinite, because we love the mitzvah, and we're not even motivated by the schar of the mitzvah. So Yiratzon v'zocha, that during these days of Sfira, I don't want to count the days, because then I might be able to make a bracha tonight. We have, I think, about 2 weeks left. I said, I'm not sure, but anyway, we should be zocha during these days to begin to do a cleanup job, a tara process to purify our brains, and be zocha the kol ra'amim, and be zocha on Chag HaShavuos to real, true, genuine Kabbalas HaTorah, a Kabbalas HaTorah of simcha with the love of the mitzvos, a Kabbalas HaTorah that will allow us to reach all the way on high. Tein Yiratzon. Amen. Thank you so much.